Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July edition of the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness Legislative Action Committee call. Glad you're with us today. It's like a double Monday today on a Tuesday since we have a short week, so glad you could carve out this time to be with us. We have an action-packed agenda, so while you're introducing yourselves in chat, why don't I go ahead and give you the agenda for today. So this is the part where we do welcome, introductions, and a little housekeeping. We're going to have two guest speakers today from the Lenawee Continuum of Care, and they will introduce themselves just in a minute. Clint Bruger and Madeline DeMarco. Then Eric Huffnagel is going to launch into some federal updates that we have. I'll do a few state updates. We have just a couple MICA updates, and then we want to hear from you about what's going on, any news from around the state where you are located and hear what's going on. And then we will remind you that our next meeting is once again on a Monday, August 1st. And we have guest speaker Amanda Carlisle from Washtenaw Housing Alliance. And she is going to talk about their magnificent advocacy efforts and wins in their community. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide. Thank you, Eleanor. And it is my pleasure to introduce today our guest speakers, Clint and Madeline. Take it away.
Hey, well, thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. I just want to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be able to share with you some of the work that we're doing in Lenawee County. We've developed a toolkit for some advocacy work that we plan to use in our continuum of care in Lenawee County, but it's really our hope that our advocacy toolkit can grow some legs and maybe move into other organizations or other community collaborations, even, maybe agency or organization boards, and lots of other ways that this toolkit could be used in many ways. But I think it's important to start with some introductions. My name is Clint Bruger. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the Director of Training and Outreach at Community Action Agency in Jackson, Lenawee, and Hillsdale counties. I also am the co-chair of the Lenawee Continuum of Care, and I'm also the chair of a local planning body for Hillsdale County's Balance of State Continuum of Care. So I'm going to let my colleague here introduce herself, and then she'll get us launched in our presentation.
Thank you, Clint. I want to echo your gratitude for being here and sharing this space with all of you today. We're very excited to share what we have been working on. My name is Madeline DeMarco, and I use the pronouns she and her. I work at Lenawee Community Mental Health Authority doing community outreach and prevention work. And part of my role includes being the secretary for Lenawee County's Continuum of Care. So with that, we have the next slide, please. And as Clint said, we're here to talk with you all today about the advocacy toolkit that we have created. And I also want to acknowledge that it wasn't just Clint and I that created this toolkit. We have a group of colleagues that worked with us, and we are here representing them today. So I want to make sure to give them credit for their contributions as well. Next slide, please. All right, so we are going to start with a little bit of background before we get into the advocacy toolkit itself. We thought it would be important to take a trip back in time to look at why we decided to put this toolkit together. Next slide, please. So we've had a couple of headline-making housing-related events occur in Lenawee County over the past few years. First, in about 2020, we had a local ordinance passed in the city of Adrian to prohibit camping in public parks. And we knew that this was primarily, first and foremost, a reaction to and against folks living with homelessness. And so when we heard about this ordinance being proposed, we did our best to, submit letters of concern, speak at city meetings, and other ways of sharing our opposition to this proposal, but unfortunately, the proposal still went through and the camping ban went into effect. Then about 8 months later, we learned that the Adrian Inn, which was the only place in Lenawee County that is able to work with a continuum of care to provide hotel vouchers to folks, was being labeled a public nuisance. And so we tried the same things again, writing letters, speaking at city meetings, but the declaration moved forwards anyway. And so we were starting to get a little bit tired of these things happening to us over and over again, and realize that maybe our strategies of affecting change could use a little bit of revamping. They needed a little bit of help. So we met to discuss strategies to help those advocacy efforts, to help keep us ahead of the game. Next slide, please. So as part of this strategizing, we sent out a survey to our full membership of the continuum of care. And in this survey, we asked for feedback about how the continuum of care was doing on a whole, but more importantly, about our advocacy strategies and how effective people thought that they were. And so here are some of the results that we got. So while in general, we thought that the COC was doing an okay job, there was definitely some room for improvement. Next slide, please. And we specifically noted these areas as needing some support around. So that we noticed that we were doing a good job communicating amongst ourselves, amongst the continuum, but we could do better raising awareness around among the larger public and with governmental and other organizational bodies. And that we also saw value as a continuum in having a clear and formalized advocacy strategy. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to here and now. Based on those feedback, we created a list of action steps that we could take to address some of those options. And the first thing on our list was to form a subcommittee to create an advocacy toolkit. From there, we would provide short education sessions and trainings to the COC about the toolkit and best advocacy practices. And then ideally, our ultimate goal is to have each work group creating an advocacy plan. Next slide.
So what is the toolkit? Let's go to the next slide. We wanted to make sure that we had an easily accessible document that provided a basic understanding of what advocacy is and some of the tools and tips for how to begin doing the advocacy work. We had realized that all of us had a desire to really communicate outside of our own continuum effectively, but really needed a starting point for how we were going to do it. It seemed a little bit larger than what any of us really knew. So as Madeline had mentioned, we formed that subcommittee to come up with a toolkit to make it an easy way for our subgroups to be able to do this work. Next slide. So the contents of the toolkit really has 5 sections. In the first, it defines what advocacy is and gives some key terms and what they mean. This section also defines what lobbying is, and it gives the readers an understanding of the difference between the two, as well as some of the rules for each. We wanted to make sure that the folks in our continuum and anybody who might use the toolkit knows what is legal or not legal, so that they don't inadvertently break the law or get themselves into some hot water. So in that first section, it really lays out advocacy and the differences between doing advocacy work and lobbying. The next section explains how to sustain the advocacy work and discusses some of the challenges of the work and how we can respond to them. It lays out some common internal challenges, for example, maybe feeling defeated or that things are moving too slow. It also provides some examples of external challenges, such as time demands and having to get things done within a time period before, for example, the city government makes a decision to close parks for camping overnight. It also it goes on to explain, outside of the internal and external challenges, ways that we can sustain ourselves through those so that we can come out on top. We realize that advocacy work is not easy. So really beginning with some of the frustrations that come about we thought was good for our group and for anybody that might want to use this toolkit. The third section discusses when it's time to create an advocacy plan, and also a few tools and tips for getting things started. The fourth section, that's the big one, because it's the how-to portion of our toolkit. It takes folks step by step through the process of developing an advocacy plan, beginning with goal setting, and then on to inventorying resources and assets, identifying support and opposition, naming targets and agents of change, and then finally choosing strategies and tactics for doing the advocacy work. And then in that final section, it contains all of the resources that one would need to actually do the work. Contains a variety of tools to help folks as they develop their advocacy plan. It has checklists, a people profile, a strategy map, some templates for ways that you can do the work, and to be honest with you, a lot more. Some of the tools in there go back to explaining how to sustain through those internal challenges and those external challenges. Just a lot of different resources that folks can do to make sure that the plan that they develop is well thought through, so that it can be implemented well and hopefully have positive results as a result. Next slide, please. So why is it important to have an advocacy plan? Next slide. It's important that all people have the ability to have their voice heard on issues that are important to them, to protect and promote their rights and have their wishes genuinely considered when decisions are being made about their lives. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, as we are in the advocacy committee for MICA. So I know you all know these things, but I think it's worth saying again. Next slide. So why was it important to our COC in Lenawee County? Well, at the most basic level, we need advocates to spread the word about the need for affordable housing, the issues surrounding homelessness in our community, and housing that is increasingly inaccessible to the most vulnerable, and to really garner attention and support. And quite honestly, we are those advocates. We, the members of the COC, are a really good starting point there. And so this toolkit really was developed to ensure that the folks that are part of our groups know that we need them to do the work. It's, many hands make light work. So we need all of our people to be involved. Next slide, please.
And so finally, we're going to wrap up with just our hopes and dreams and next steps for the advocacy toolkit. Next slide, please. Our ultimate goal with the toolkit is that each of our subgroups, we have 3 right now, homeless youth, public awareness, and emergency shelter, will each create their own advocacy plans. And these plans will work together to move our COC closer to the full continuum's goal of eradicating homelessness in Lenawee County. We recognize that this is a big shift for our COC though, and have a series of smaller goals that will help build our capacity and skills to advocate effectively. So for example, and we can have the next slide, please. We'll be presenting some practical case studies to the COC where we can get group experience using and applying the toolkit to real world situations. We did our first case study about a month or 2 ago where we looked at fair market rents in Lenawee County, and we collectively went through the how-to steps outlined in the toolkit in order to create like a sample advocacy plan around this topic. We also, like Clint mentioned at the beginning, want the toolkit to be used outside of our continuum. While we created the toolkit with the COC and housing in mind, the steps and tools and considerations that the toolkit contains can really be applied to any advocacy situation, not just those related to housing. So we're sharing the toolkit throughout the community and encouraging other organizations and groups like the one that we're in right now to use it as well. And then finally, we also want the toolkit to be a living document that grows as we grow. So for example, I think that we're already on our second or third edition of the toolkit actually, because we've gotten some feedback from the community that's enabled us to make some changes that increase the accessibility, usability, and effectiveness of the toolkit already. So hopefully we'll just continue to learn and grow with the coalition. Next slide, please. And that brings us to the end of our prepared content for you all today. Thank you so much for the space for us to share about our toolkit with you all today. I think we have a few time for some questions if folks want to either unmute or the chat. At least I'm not sure how you normally work this part.
Either way, however people want to do it. And I saw that Anna mentioned just an affirmation about needing to hear that today about the, power of advocacy and how you're, the great resources that you all put together and the process that you use to really, garner support and get feedback from folks and really have this be a document that everyone can use. So does anyone have any questions? And while we're waiting, I'm wondering, Amy, if you could pop the document in the chat. And also we sent the toolkit out with our LAC MailChimp, but we can share it again here. And I also asked if you had any thoughts about where it's going to live. Is it like electronically somewhere? Are you all going to have it on your website, or do you have a COC website? Any thoughts about that?
We do have a COC website. I don't think either Madeline or I are the ones that control that, but we'll definitely make sure that it ends up there. And I can always keep you posted when we figure out where its ultimate home will be. But certainly any of you all can, take it from the chat and use it. That's the reason we did the work.
Great. Thank you. I see that Amy put it in the chat as a document. Thanks, Amy. And thank you so much, Flint and Madeline. You're welcome to stay on. And if anyone has any questions, please continue to, you can put them in the chat.
Great. Thank you guys for the opportunity. We appreciate it. And we hope people use our toolkit. So spread the word.
Definitely. We definitely will. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And now we will turn to Eric Huffnagel for some federal updates. Eric.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Lisa. And just to forewarn you, I may turn my camera off because I'm experiencing some bandwidth issues on my end. So if you don't see me momentarily, that's why. It's not because I'm shy and I'm hiding. So let's start off with some federal updates. Wanted to first of all just give you an update on the appropriations for fiscal year 2023. There was a budget that was released, a draft budget released through the executive branch that was looking at an increase over previous years, and we've reported on that previously. But what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of an update on where that is in process. So next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at the House T-HUD bill, which is Transportation and Housing and Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee, they released a proposed 2023 draft HUD funding bill on the 22nd of June that was sent to the full Appropriations Committee for markup, which in essence, what we're talking about is the subcommittees, the appropriations subcommittees submitting their draft budgets to the full Appropriations Committee, who then have the pleasure of going through it and picking and choosing and hammering and doing what they would like collectively. So it's in that process right now. It would provide a $62.7 billion budget for HUD for affordable housing, homelessness, and community development programs, an increase of $9 billion over the fiscal year 22 enacted levels, and $1.1 billion above what the president had included in the executive draft budget that I alluded to earlier. So we're really talking about some significant increases coming through the House's version. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I just want to remind everybody that we do need to keep pressure on, even though the House has a draft budget that they're looking at that would have significant increases. We need to keep putting that pressure on because, as you know, when you go through that process of negotiations, some things hit the chopping block, and we want to make sure that we are the squeaky wheel. So I would encourage your organization to sign on to support the highest levels of funding for affordable housing, homelessness, and community development resources. And we would like you to contact your senators and representatives and urge them to look at some key areas where we think investments should be taking place. Next slide, please. So let's shift from the budget. I'll have some information that I'll be dropping into the chat box for you as well, a bunch of links. So be prepared to grab those so that you can get some additional information and also take some action. So Build Back Better Act, as we've talked about in the past, it's almost like we've forgotten what the name of that proposal was way back when. But for all intents and purposes, those conversations are still taking place between the White House and congressional leaders trying to work out some kind of an agreement. And we know Joe Manchin is the individual who kind of gummed up the works, and he is a key person within those conversations. But I thought I would just take time to have a brief lesson here. We talk about budget reconciliation. That's the process that's being pursued right now with respect to Build Back Better. Budget reconciliation is a process, and I want to explain it because many times people hear it and they don't really know what that is. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, I did what most people do. I went to a source of information that is at our fingertips, Wikipedia. So budget reconciliation actually is just a mechanism, parliamentary procedure within Congress to help expedite the passage of budgetary legislation in the Senate. Some of you may know, some of you may not know that right now, when we're talking about any kind of a fiscal bill that is being considered by the Senate, there needs to be a super majority, a filibuster. So you're getting little pieces of information here. You've heard these words before, but the Senate requires a 60 or more vote supermajority to pass bills that are related to appropriations or budgeting. So what this allows is an end run around that. The budget reconciliation process is one that allows the Senate to vote and pass bills with a simple majority of 51 votes or 50 votes, plus the vice president acting as the tiebreaker. So I wanted you to understand what that is. When there's discussion about the budget reconciliation, it's a different process being used to try to get the same outcome of having dollars appropriated for the Build Back Better Act. Next slide, please. So as I said, those negotiations are continuing. Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin are sitting down playing games of checkers, and the best out of 7 is going to get what they want. So we don't know exactly what's going to be the outcome here. There is some concern that housing, as that number, the overall number gets reduced, as it has been from the beginning, I think 2.2, 1.5, et cetera, $billion. We're looking at potential cuts of housing investments. So we want to make sure that that message of support rings out pretty loudly in these conversations. So again, squeaky wheel will help keep this on the table. And we do want to just highlight the NLIHC, National Low Income Housing Coalition's top priorities that we feel are appropriate for inclusion in that package. Next slide, please. So again, critical that targeted housing investments remain in the budget reconciliation bill that's enacted. So these are just a few of the elements that we wanted to highlight. Expanded rental assistance that would increase services to 300,000 additional households, investing $65 billion in repair to public housing, as well as some operational funding, and then investing in the National Housing Trust Fund. These are things that we've all talked about before. Next slide. And I will be dropping those in the chat box, but I wanted to give you an example here of what we're talking about when we quantify this, just a couple of those elements that were in that previous slide. Expanding rental assistance. What would that mean to Michigan? These are projections that have been put together by smarter people than me that show that we'd be talking about 8,800 households in Michigan that could benefit, or over 19,000 people that could benefit. And you see a breakdown here of the projected number of women, children under 18, people with disabilities, and seniors, and how that would break down. Underneath this element right here is looking at race and ethnicity. And as we're thinking in terms of racial equity, as we're looking at resources that are made available in the state of Michigan to those who are in need, when we think in terms of homelessness, we see here 54% of the households that would be benefiting from the expansion of the vouchers would be Black residents. We know that when we think in terms of the proportion of individuals who are homeless in the state of Michigan, that we have a higher percentage of Black individuals who are affected by homelessness. So this would be directing resources to that population that we know is drastically underserved. So just making an example here for you to see, quantifying who would be helped, how many people would be helped through these projections. Next slide, please. We'll move on here to the National Housing Trust Fund, and I apologize for cutting off the figure at the bottom there. I need to do a better job with my slides. This is something that we've shared before. Actually, that number has been a little notation at the bottom of a slide, but the figure of $15 billion going across the country, with Michigan getting a share of $382,900,000 as a projection of the number of dollars that would come into the state of Michigan that would be used for the development of affordable housing. So pretty significant benefits that would come to the state of Michigan just with those two elements alone. New resources. Next slide, please. So it's in red here, folks. Take action now. Budget reconciliation. We do have some information that can help facilitate your participation as we've done in the past. So really want you to be thinking about emails. You can tweet if you prefer to do that. Call representative and senators from the state and keying in on targeted investments for rental assistance, public housing, and the National Housing Trust Fund in reconciliation package. I'm going to be dropping again some stuff into the chat, and I would encourage you to grab it and to pursue it. So there's a call-in script that's available through the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Thank you very much, Courtney Cooperman, who is on this call from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Always nice to have you here with us. And there's also an advocacy toolkit, which has some additional information to help facilitate your participation, including a link to the source of information the NLIHC has put together that will allow you to make a phone call and or send an email out. Next slide, please. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit here, but please take action. It's important. I want to talk about the Eviction Crisis Act. This is something that we reported out at a previous meeting, just letting you know that this was something that was in the works with Senators Barrett and Bennett and Portman, providing something on the Senate side, but a companion bill from Representative Richie Torres that we were able to assist in getting some sign-ons to a letter. Our organization, as well as CEDM, were active in trying to spread the word about this and getting some additional organizations to sign on. I just wanted to toss up a list here. A shout out to Avalon Housing. They have participated in calls for the LAC in the past, but this is an example where we've put out the call to action and folks have signed on. And it may seem like a very small and insignificant thing. It's a very simple step, but collectively we show that there is an interest from the state of Michigan in keying in on certain things such as this important legislation. Next slide, please. Okay, now I want to talk about something new that's been introduced, the Fair Housing Improvement Act. This again is a couple of companion bills, and what we mean by that are these are friends who are traveling the road together, one in the Senate and one in the House. Just to let you know, this is important because this is at the national level talking about prohibiting housing discrimination based on source of income, which this is a nice segue. We'll be popping over to that, and Lisa's going to give you an update on that one, but also with respect to military or veteran status. So We're doing work here on the state level with respect to focusing on ending housing discrimination based on source of income, but this is an effort to focus on it at the federal level, giving the Fair Housing Act some teeth, broadening it to specifically include the source of income as one of those things that cannot be discriminated against. So it's been referred to a couple of committees. Just want to let you know about that. We'll see how that moves forward, but hopefully it gets some traction, because that would certainly make our life easier here in Michigan if that were to take place. So with that, I think I'm ready to kick it over to Lisa. I've set it up for her now to talk about what's happening with respect to source of income and attacking discrimination in the state of Michigan with respect to that. So Lisa, are you ready to take it on?
I'm ready. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate all your great updates. And here it is. So really excited about that fair housing national bill that just got dropped. And, we've been working on this since 2019 here in the state of Michigan. We have 4 pieces of legislation, 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate, that were proposed in 2021. We still have not gotten committee hearings. If we don't get committee hearings on those and get passed out of committee onto the floor for a vote, after the end of this calendar year, we need to reintroduce them next year. We have a coalition working on this. It's called the Coalition for Expanding Housing Access. And one of our members engaged with Representative Robbie, who's one of our co-sponsors. And so we have a lot of great ideas and more kind of emphasis on kind of ways that we can target some moderate Democrats and some other folks to really help advocate for this. We have a sign-on letter that we have sent out, and hopefully you've seen it. Amy, I don't know if you can pop that in the chat. If not, I can later. But we really are hoping to get some testimonials from people with lived experience during this summer, and also really working on legislative targets, as well as individual landlords who have really been using housing choice vouchers and accepting them, and recognizing the importance of using them for people that really need that income support. So it's very critical. So we're very excited about having the sign-on letter to really demonstrate the breadth and the depth of the support and the need for this across the state. As Eric mentioned, it also does recognize, I think there's about more than a dozen sources of income that it would include and prevent discrimination against. So it's super important, including veterans. Thank you, Amy. Veterans, she's putting it in the chat, as well as child support and alimony, TANF or FIP, as well as housing choice vouchers or Section 8s. Okay, next slide, please. Many of you may have seen, or maybe it got past you in the long holiday weekend, but very early Friday morning, the state budget was approved by the legislature, and it was sent to the governor's desk for signature. It is the largest state budget in history, with nearly $76 billion with a B dollars. The largest, components are infrastructure, money to fix those roads, and schools are the 2 largest portions. But there are also many, many things that are fantastic, including increases in mental health support, behavioral and physical health components and support, additional psychiatric beds, as well as a pilot that was recommended by the Campaign to End Homelessness in the MDHHS budget for $6 million for supportive services and permanent supportive housing. So we're really excited about that. And I will pop a link in the chat in a moment with the DHHS budget, just their component. It's pretty, it's a lot to look at, the entire budget, as you can imagine. So here is the MDHHS portion. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and just to say, it's expected that the governor will sign the budget. which is good. It has to be done before October 1st. So this is really the target. They usually try to do it by July 1st. So they're well within their time frame. Really nothing to report on the eviction expungement bill. It still needs to have a hearing in the committee that it was assigned to. Waiting to hear back from Senator Brink's folks on what's going on with that. Eric and I participated in some eviction conversations on data and reporting about evictions around the state with U of M Poverty Solutions and the State Housing Committee, which is comprised of mostly legal aid advocates. So we're having another conversation this Friday and just talking about what can be done to have more systematic reporting of evictions. As we know, the funding for the emergency rental assistance is winding down. So we need a mechanism to know how we're doing in the state. Are evictions going up or down? That's really kind of the genesis of these conversations. So we hope to have really some productive results. Next slide, please. As many of you know, the SARA program portal closed June 30th, kind of. However, MCAH sent out some guidance on July 1st that really indicated that they have additional funding. They didn't use up as much as they thought. So they're reaching out to the SARA administrators around the state and saying that some of the SARA applications can be prioritized. Those people with active evictions, with summons and complaints, they have some kind of priority areas that they've laid out. For sure, people with active evictions, and then second priority are initial applications that were received before the June 30th deadline, or people with recertifications for additional months that were received before May 1st, or people with pending evictions. And then the third priority are recertifications that were received after May 1st, and they'll look at those in order of submission. So MCAH is looking at the applications that they have across the state that all the SARA administrators have. Towards the end of July, they will evaluate the spending rate to determine if the SARA funding can continue, whether they can, local communities can continue to accept eviction applications into August. There's a special kind of process that local administrators can use to invite additional applications that have been submitted through the portal, or they can accept paper applications that can be uploaded through the portal. So local SARA administrators are very key in that process and working on those procedures. As well, SARA administrators were invited to talk about how they plan to use some of their excess administrative funding after the emergency rental assistance is expended to provide housing stability services. So think of that kind of like case management or housing navigation services that can be provided to people to look for maybe other sources of funding for people to either stay where, prevention to stay where they are for rental assistance, or if the person wanted to move, other sources of funding to enable them to do that. So there is some flexibility in the SARA program, which is really good news.
Lisa, there's a question in the chat from Ms. Scott.
I think you can, hi Anna, glad you're with us. I think you can,
Thanks, Lisa.
yeah, to check in with your local SARA administrator, or we can help get connected with them to talk about either a recert or a new application. I'm going to be talking with MCAH at 2 o'clock today for our monthly chat about connections. So you
obviously know what this is regarding, so
yes,
that would be helpful.
Sure.
Just to try and process this along,
right.
so we can focus on the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So that's good news. It's not a hard and fast deadline, and there's more funding available. And they also asked communities that did feel like they were going to run out of funding to contact them. So they're willing to spread things around. But the bottom line is that the deadline, at least there's more funding through the end of this month. And then on a case-by-case basis, community by community into August. So that's good news. Thanks, Amy. Okay, next slide. And we are also engaged right now with our fabulous partners at the National Low Income Housing Coalition, a grant around election work again this year called Our Homes, Our Votes. And we are doing a lot of different things. We are working in concert with communities on voter registration. We just did a webinar last month on the 28th on voter registration, and we will be sharing that link and uploading that to our YouTube channel. We're also engaged in doing a lot of education for voters, a lot of engagement and helping local communities doing that work. We also sent out our annual or semi-annual candidate survey, went out late last month to all the candidates for Congress, for the Michigan State Legislature. We also sent it out to the governor, the Attorney General, and Secretary of State candidates. And we have been getting some great responses. So once we have kind of a good number, probably later on this month, we will be putting that information out in a variety of ways. Once the primary happens, which is August 2nd, we will be doing candidate summaries, maybe by district, and we will be engaging with you. We would love to host town halls with you if you want to invite some of the candidates in your local area to do a town hall or some sort of roundtable. We'd love to partner with you on that. Oh, we have over 70 responses. Thank you, Amy. That's super exciting. I know I got some calls, a lot of interest by the candidates, so we're really excited about that, because there's a lot of demands on them at this time, and just really less than a month before the primaries, so not a lot of time. But we would invite you to partner. Is there a question?
It's Allison. I was just wondering if you could just explain a little more what a town hall would be, or what it would look like, or what would happen if Advocacy took you up on that.
So it could be probably most likely on Zoom, unless you're within driving distance of us, and some people are still doing a lot of virtual events, but it could be an invitation to the candidates, whichever level you're interested in, probably your legislature. And we've focused our survey mostly on housing and homelessness issues, about funding, about their priorities. So we would help you create a list of issues that you would like to focus on and questions. And you could invite the candidates and send a list of questions to them so they can be prepared in what topics you're going to talk about. And then we would, help you send out a link to your community members and publicize it. And then we'd hold a town hall, and we'd help you do that on Zoom. And we could moderate it if you wanted to, and just have a good conversation about what the candidates' views are, and what their priorities are, what they see as issues in the community in terms of housing and homelessness and funding, and could be an hour, hour and a half. So that's kind of our vision. It could be a roundtable, whatever format you want it to be. But those are usually the most successful, publicizing it and letting them know the questions ahead of time so they can be prepared. As I mentioned, the primary is August 2nd. It's really super important. And about 20% of the people who are eligible to vote in a primary actually do. And really the primary is the most important because it really sets the stage. In a lot of communities, either lean Democratic or Republican. And so it whittles down the candidates and basically decides a lot of the election by the primary. I also wanted to mention, we really want to work with the COCs on getting out the vote, registering people who are eligible either to vote in person or vote at home, which our Secretary of State calls the absentee ballot. We don't have early voting in Michigan, so the absentee ballot is our only vehicle. And this year you're invited to request it. It is not being sent out to all eligible voters. So you need to request it. So we will help you. We've got a lot of materials on that. Amy did a great job of putting all of the materials on. We have a couple dedicated pages on our website. And so we really would love to partner with you on, if you're doing connect events this summer or fall leading up to the election, which is November 8th. We would love to partner with you. We have some great resources, and we also just got some pens, giveaway items and swag. So we'd love to work with you. Research indicates about 60% of people experiencing homelessness are eligible to vote, but I believe in the last election, only 11% did. So it's really critical that we get the voice of people who are the most vulnerable, the most in need of our housing and supportive resources to the table to register and vote. Thanks, Eleanor. You can go to the next slide. Couple updates, and Allison, you can chime in if you have anything else pending, but there is a webinar coming up on July 15th on supporting resiliency in housing and health professionals. And this is really geared focusing on staff. So you can register if you go to our website on our training calendar at mihomeless.org. It's right there on the face page. Anything else, Allison, to promote around training or anything you want to mention?
The free training for July is on working with people who are on the sex offender registry. So I know that that is a barrier often for case managers. So that training is on July, sorry, I'm in June. July 18th, so it's usually on the third Monday of the month. All of our webinars are on the third Monday, and they're from 1 to 2:30, and it's totally free. I'll put the link to sign up in the chat.
Great. Amy said she's grabbing it. Thank you. I must have missed that one. So lots of resources. I know the campaign to end homelessness has also had a lot of DEI training that's going on. That's also on our calendar as well. Next slide, please. That's, oops. Anything else from any of my colleagues that we want to promote? All right, there's the link. Thank you, Amy, for the training. All right, next slide, please. This is where we hear from you. Anything going on in your community? Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Lisa, I wasn't quick enough on the draw. I did have something else. I just wanted to put it out here since we have some partners who do have a connection to Jackson COC. I just wanted to put this out. We've been contacted by someone from Guidehouse who is trying to make a connection to get stakeholders at the table to be providing input with respect to ARPA dollars and how they're going to be used in Jackson County. I just want to make sure that Clint, you or whoever it may be participating in the Jackson County COC is aware of that effort and have been invited to that table, because we definitely want to connect you guys if indeed you've not heard from anyone at this point from Guidehouse.
I'm not exactly sure. I don't participate in the Jackson County COC, but I definitely know who will, and I will definitely pass the message along. And if they need to be connected, I'll refer them to y'all.
That'd be perfect. Thanks, Clint.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for letting me know.
Great. Thank you. I will also forward it to Nation Outside because I know that they have a chapter in Jackson. They work with returning citizens or former offenders, or however you want to, people involved in the criminal justice system. So I will forward it to them too. Anything else? Anna, did you want to bring up something that's an issue that you're dealing with?
Sure. So hello everyone. It's good to see you. I obviously know many of you from previous work within the LAC, but also on the coalition, etc. Everything with Micah. But as a lot of you guys know, I did receive a mainstream Section 8 voucher here in the city of Grand Rapids. And I'm actually having issues with my landlord and I actually getting the communication and her even being paid despite everything being done, the inspection, etc. And so it's honestly, it's disheartening. But I guess when we look at it, we have to look at Michigan as a whole. And there are some great cities and great townships and great counties that are very rapid. And mine's through the Grand Rapids Housing
Commission.
Yes, commission, sorry. I'm like, there's so many C's. So it's one of those things that I'm looking at, this is a huge barrier as I'm trying to obviously get my own mental health straightened out so I can obviously return to work. But for someone who's never been a landlord before, who has a heart to want to help, it's very difficult as well. So I'm not sure, just kind of wanting to bring that to everyone's attention because there are some really great individuals and counties, cities, etc., that are really doing really amazing work. But then I look at one where we actually have source of income protection, all that stuff. But if the landlords aren't getting paid or you can't get a hold of them, that's a huge burden and a huge block that's going to make things more difficult. So just something so you guys are aware that we sadly have areas that aren't fulfilling the obligation. So I just kind of wanted to bring it to everyone's attention.
And just wondering too, if anybody has any suggestions for Anna, that she's exploring a couple options because she and I have been in contact, but if anyone has any other suggestions, that'd be great.
Or I can throw my email in the chat as well if you come up with anything or have any suggestions. That'd be amazing. And I thank Lisa for her hard work trying to help me with this and multiple other things. So thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Anyone else? Comments, thoughts, something's going on in your community?
Lisa, this is Amy. I just wanted, although I put it in the chat to make sure it wasn't missed. I know in these meetings, there's a lot of links and things put out, and we're also just trying to make sure the call to action is as easy as possible for you all. So even if you're not attending the next LAC meeting, when you get the LAC newsletter, there's one section that says call to action. And I try to put all these links in there so you can just go to one spot to find everything. So sometimes people delete it thinking I'm not going to that meeting, I'm not going to read it, but please still keep it. If you need to retrieve any of these links, they'll be in there. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy, that's helpful. Great, let's go to the next slide, please. So our next meeting is Monday, August 1st at noon, and we have Amanda Carlisle from Washington Housing Alliance, and she'll be sharing a lot of the advocacy efforts that they've been doing locally, and they've gotten some great funding for a couple of development projects, permanent supportive housing, and also they did a millage effort a couple of years ago and a lot of great things. So looking forward to hearing from them. And thank you again to Clint and Madeline for their great work in Lenawee County and for the Advocacy Toolkit. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Hi, everybody.
Bye now.
Stay cool.